Good afternoon, good evening, and good everything for everybody else. My God, Tony, what time is it in Romania?
It is
I can't believe. Lord, well, let's start with a roll call. Good, whatever to everybody. This is Jaime Rivera from Pocketnow, along with the rest of the Pocketnow team. We are talking about Google I/O. The event just finished around 30 minutes ago, probably 40. And aside from a lot of coding and a lot of technical talk that only Joe understands, thank you, Joe. Let's go through a roll call of everybody that's here. Mr. Anton D. Naj, our editor-in-chief, how are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I am tired, but I am excited about everything that I've seen today.
I am happy to have you on the show, dude. It's just so hard since you're pretty much asleep at the time that we've had these roundtables before.
It is good to be here finally, and yeah, I'm sleepy.
It is great. It's great. How's the Porsche?
It's good.
Mr. Joe Levi, how are you, senior editor? It's great to have you here.
Oh, it's a great day for Android.
It is a great day for Android, and we can't wait to hear your particular opinion on everything that just taught. Because you're the only one that understood half of it, man. I mean, because the show was like half code and everything else was for the rest of the world. Then Mr. Michael Fisher, our own editorial director. How are you? I forget your title. Sorry, dude.
Very well. Well, that's all right. My title, is a dynamic and a changing, a fluid thing, like we all are as humans and as beings of light.
And Duncan Donuts coffee. I can't believe, by the way, the only reason I drink this is because Michael Fisher got me into this. But anyways, our chief news editor, Mr. Steven Schenk, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine. How's it going?
It's going great. We've got a good day, but we don't really have much time for this show. We have a lot of coverage coming up, a lot of editorials. We have full video coverage on everything that's happening. Michael is at the show floor right now, by the way. He was at the event. And so let's just try to give a little rundown of everything that was talked today. There's a lot on the floor. How about you, Mr. Steven Schenk? How would we like to start with, I don't know, Android L? Let's begin with that.
Yeah, that's definitely the big news out of the I/O keynote, at least for users are concerned. We got a preview today of what the next big new release for Android is going to look like. The full thing isn't arriving to the fall, but the developer preview is coming out tomorrow, so devs can get a head start working with all these changes. And really, there are a lot of them here. We have this new look for Android here, the material design. Believe,
Yep.
yeah, and we're overwhelmed here a little bit. This is like you really like jelly beans, and then someone goes and delivers you a 20-pound box of jelly beans. You like them, but there's a lot to get through here. So in addition to the new look, we have some UI tweaks, a new way of describing how apps will have their interfaces to allow better expansion between devices. The same APKs will run on to Android TV, getting ahead of ourselves here, as well as on phones or on tablets. We learned about expanded notification options, changes to the lock screen, Chrome, a lot of stuff. More technical things like battery improvements and this move to Arc, how that's going to improve the way apps run, and a little talk about gaming as well, looking at some of the graphical improvements going to Android. It's a heck of a lot here.
Cool, cool. I mean, Michael, you were at the event. How was the vibe at the show? How was everything?
First, I needed to unmute the microphone. I'm sorry about that bump. So I need to make it clear that I'm at one of the extended events. I am in Cambridge. I'm at MIT, or right outside MIT, where Google has an office, and I've been surveying things from there, and I love coming to this office. It's a lot of fun. But the thing is, the mood here has been sort of diametrically opposed to mine the entire time. During the Android Wear segment, most particularly, I was in like rapt attention, thoroughly enjoying everything I was seeing, and being mildly aroused by the whole thing. I was really, really into it. And during that maybe 35 minutes of time, about half of the auditorium I was sitting in kind of like picked that moment to go get a sandwich, because there's always food at Google events. So like I've been existing in this world where like no one else is excited about the things I am, because this is a developer conference, and I think a lot of the people here, this isn't a very big Android town. Like, this isn't a very big Android office. So it's been a they've been excited about the other stuff Google's been announcing today.
That's interesting you said that. I would have assumed the Android TV stuff and Android the developer stuff would be the things they sort of zone out on. Android Wear, we're getting in the sense that smartphones are finally starting to catch on with the public at large, and yet You just weren't seeing them responding to it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think this town in particular, in this office, and to a lesser extent the industry as a whole has a much broader take on a lot of this stuff. And we all at Pocketnow get really jazzed about the consumer level devices because it's like that's the stuff that for us I think is easiest to get excited about. I don't necessarily want to talk long-term strategy and business competitive tactics and that kind of thing. I want to talk about this new thing I can wear that'll make my life easier, or at least make me feel like I'm living in the future, and I think that's the cool stuff. But that not everyone is into the same thing. So I mean, hey, maybe I need to grow up, and I'm not going to do it.
Well, speaking of which, and I would love to get everybody's opinion on this. What do you guys think of the whole material design? I think that's probably one of the biggest things. I mean, we really didn't think, or at least I particularly didn't think we were going to get a revamped UI, and it's quite significant. And funny, we've kind of been using it on Google Plus for a bit, ever since the application got updated a couple of weeks ago. It's pretty much the whole element of the material UI. I don't know. What do you guys think?
You haven't been using Google Plus. Nobody's been using Google Plus. Don't lie to us.
Yeah, I know.
I have.
Oh, Joe, you're like the only guy. But Tony, what do you think about this?
I'll go first and say that we're seeing something strange here, which is strange in a good way. I think that Google didn't necessarily have to update its user interface because the stock Android interface was good. And Apple, on the other hand, who really needs to update something on the user interface and will probably not do it, and they didn't do it in the past. So I think that the new user interface from Android L, which is going to be either Lollipop or something else, is a welcome. It's a breath of fresh air. It brings you something new. But this brings me to the question, and I would like all of you to answer. What do you guys think will happen to OEM skins now that we have this great-looking stock vanilla user interface on Android? Will OEMs just screw it up?
Well, haven't we gotten a statement already from at least one OEM? HTC has addressed this matter with us, where they've said that they're going to keep up with the changes. The clock starts now. They're going to be rebuilding the skin around the new thing. I mean, is that your question, Tony? Like, are OEMs reacting well to it?
That's part of the question, but we could put it more brutally if you want. Would HTC ditch Sense? Would Samsung ditch TouchWiz just to get the stock user interface in the hands of customers? Or would Google require OEMs to do that now that the UI is polished?
No, I really don't think we're going to see OEMs ditch their third-party UIs for this. I mean, yeah, there are some changes here. Some of them are more significant than others, but there's nothing here that's going to cause a manufacturer to do an about-face on their strategies with regard to Android, I don't think.
Now, one of the things that we did see was
Go ahead, Joe.
there were some hints dropped regarding how dynamic colors are going to be brought in, how images are going to be able to programmatically, you're going to be able to pull an image, color out of an image and use that. And they kind of dropped some hints about how some of the more thematic elements are going to be able to be applied throughout the entire OS. So rather than seeing a custom skin, we might start seeing more custom theming done, which then goes back to way back in the day of CyanogenMod when we had that theme engine from T-Mobile. If you guys remember that, that's still there running at the core of the CyanogenMod ROMs. We may see a shift from a TouchWiz or a Sense UI over more to a custom theme with a custom color palette that's using the Android L framework, if you will, for lack of a better word.
So you think that Sense, for example, would turn into just a theme and no longer dig into the rest of the UI? That's what you think?
I'm hoping that that's the way it's going to go, and then that will leave OEMs a little bit more able to develop apps and to build a little bit more around the notification shade and some of the other elements in the device. They'll spend less time working on their skin, and that's really the wrong term for it, but we'll go ahead and use it. And they'll spend more time giving us value rather than just a brand or some kind of a marketing gimmick that helps their device stand out from the other, because I'm hoping Android L will have all of that functionality built in and it works for everybody.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, like, for example, out of everything that we saw, I think that HTC Sense is probably like the UI that looks the most like Android L, should I say?
Well, that, and I also just got off a week of using that Asus Padphone X, and it looks an awful lot like what we're seeing with Android L. The
And not
Huawei
to,
looked a
I
lot
mean,
like Android
yeah,
L.
the Huawei one looks a lot. I mean, the LG G3. Like, there's a point at which you have to acknowledge that trends move in a certain way in design, and it doesn't matter what company you're talking about. Like, the circular toggle elements and unified sort of color banding at the top of certain apps. Like, these are not things that have been stolen from anything. I think it's just everybody's kind of doing the same thing, and the field is narrowing quite a bit.
Yeah, you guys can hate me. We had this comment over at the chat as we were going through the keynote of, obviously you can't say that iOS doesn't look like Android. I mean, the notification shade, for example, even if they don't look alike, the idea came from Android. And in that same way, ever since we've seen that change in iOS 7, where the top bar changed into a specific color, and then the rest of the UI elements became round, and we kind of see this a little in Android, although obviously. It's funny, Michael was saying of how it went away from being skeuomorphic Android, and now it came back to being skeuomorphic with that whole paper sort of elements. I don't know if you guys agree.
Then it didn't come all the way back. Yeah, it came halfway back. So yeah, we went to a totally flat area for a little bit. We're still, a lot of manufacturers are still in the midst of making that change with their UI skins. But now we have stock Android saying, okay, but we do want to reintroduce a little bit of dimension to it, and so that was, that's kind of interesting to see.
It's interesting you mentioned
dimension being the keyword there.
The skeuomorphism here, because when I first saw Android L, my initial impression was very negative. As far as the sort of emphasis being placed on transitions, being able to show the user what's happening, on-screen elements let those ripple effects and stuff when you're touching things. I'm a very pared-down UI guy. I like to touch something and see changes immediately, and transitions are my bag. But I also realize it's kind of a hoity-toity ivory tower position to put yourself in, where you need to have deep understanding of how the system works in order to appreciate how to work with it. I think with the changes we're seeing with L, it's going to be, even if it's not, the Note app looks like a notebook in order to let you know how to interact with it. The way that on-screen elements are going to move around are going to help sort of guide users through things. Even if we're not seeing explicit skeuomorphism, there are still some visual decisions being made to guide users in the right direction. I think that's a big step forward for Android.
Indeed. Now, Michael, one question to you since you were at the show. So why is it being called Android L? I mean, we came from a transition of cake names and pastry names, Kit Kat and into L. Have you any idea why they call it Android L?
No. But Tony had some wonderful speculation in the chat about this, and I think it's 100% right, and I think Taylor backed you up on that. Tony, what was your explanation for that?
I don't remember that chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then it must have been Taylor, and then you agreed with him, or we all agreed with him.
He just they want a more professional sound to this. That's my first.
No, I think that they're still seeking a partner like Kit Kat to partner with on this. Joe is laughing as though I've just said something idiotic. Joe, you disagree? You think this is going to be Android? I think this is a code.
Okay, Android L, we know L comes after K, so it's obviously the next version of Android. We don't know if that's 4.5. We don't know if it's 5.0. They really didn't tell us, and I haven't seen anything to that end. What's different from today versus previous releases is we haven't gotten a release yet. We've gotten a preview, and most of the time in the past, it's gotten its pastry or its sweets name when it was released. So I'm wondering if in the fall, when Android L becomes a real thing and is available to end users, if we won't then get licorice or lime or whatever else L could stand for. I'm all for lima bean, but I don't think they'll go that route.
There are rumors that it might be.
Or lemon pie. Lemon pie,
lemon meringue, sure. So I'm wondering if L is just the internal one because it's still a developer release for now, and then when it's finally released, that's when it will get its traditional sweets name and the statue outside of the Android building on the Google campus.
I have a question before we move on, because I know we have to wrap up this segment in order to go to the next one. Now, this is more aimed at Joe and those who are interested in technical details. I won't go into Art, Dalvik, and the other ones. I have the simple end-user question. We've seen the new user interface. We've seen that it solicits the CPU and the GPU for all those layers and shadows and everything. Now, phones on the market today, like the M8, like the S5, the G3, and the Z2, will have no problems running Android L. Probably last year's flagship didn't have or will not have problems either. What about mid-rangers? What about those phones who will be in the cheap segment, those who will be aimed at the emerging markets? How will those cope with Android L and all these changes?
Well, specifically, we saw today Android 1 that's going to be targeted specifically to these emerging markets, and combined both with KitKat and with Android L, we're seeing more of a push over there. A lot of the devices that I've been testing have had kind of lower end specs and run KitKat just fine. One of the very underutilized things that all of these devices have inside of them is that GPU, the graphics processing unit. And up until just recently, that's been there primarily for games and not a lot of the whole user interface, apps, and your home screens and just stuff that you do to interact with the device itself. As we're moving forward and making this progress, we're seeing more emphasis put on that GPU and a lot more of what used to be handled by the CPU shelved off to the GPU. So now you've got these two different components working in concert, and you're more than doubling the processing power that you had before because that GPU's gone underutilized. The second half to that question, and it might segue us into it, is the difference between Dalvik and Art. And Art, according to what we saw today, has a 2 times speed improvement over Dalvik on the Nexus 5, at least the Android L version of the Art runtime environment.
So what you're saying is that, for instance, if I had this one mini, the original one, or the S3 mini, or the S4 mini, chances are that A, I will get Android L as an update, or B, I will get Android 1 as an update, or C, HTC or Samsung might just abandon these phones.
I think the likelihood is the latter.
Android 1's not going to be an option for existing phones, I don't think. Google's trying to really streamline this thing. I talked about choosing a specific hardware and even just companies that sell the hardware so that OEMs can just put a phone together real quickly. It's sort of like the industrial version of Project Aura. It's not the same end-user customization. You pick a few things, put them together, throw one on it, you're done. So I don't think we're going to be down to existing phones.
Yeah, it's a hardware reference platform.
Android 1 it's really interesting. Android 1 is sort of like, it's like if Google wants to take, it wants to take over feature phones like completely. And they're like, okay, don't, OEMs, forget about the software. We will deal with the software. We will give you software updates. We'll give you everything. Just build a really cheap phone. And we will make sure that the operating system runs on it. And they will take care of everything.
We were talking about skins a little earlier. I think this is also a big part of the direction that Google's choosing for Android now, in that it's trying to give these smaller companies an option to have a stock Android experience as conveniently as possible to maybe discourage them from cooking up some half-baked skin just for the sake of having one. Say, no, do this. It's easier. Your users will like it better. So I feel like while some of the bigger companies with their own skins, they might live on to one extent or another, we're not going to see much of that at all on the lower end. And I think a lot of users are going to love that.
And another advantage of Android 1 that they mentioned is they're going to have the same update mechanism where updates come directly from Google, just like the Nexus family of devices and Google Play Edition devices. So where these smaller companies might not have the resources to maintain and update their, I'll call it bloat, I'm happy to call it bloat, put that in the hands of Google. Google will take care of all of the updates and push them down through their existing services, so that frees up these smaller, especially emerging markets, to be able to make devices that work in those emerging markets. It bootstraps them and it gets them going.
Now, one question, and particularly for Michael, and back to you, Joe, as well. Did anybody hear anything about 64-bit processors? That was like the big push that we were waiting for.
Yeah, we got it.
Right, but
well, no,
I mean,
we got 64-bit, but we didn't get 64-bit processors per se. We didn't hear anything about hardware or any partners that are coming out with 64-bit anything. We didn't get any announcement there. it was just kind of like an afterthought. Oh, hey, by the way, Android L and the new ARC compiler, they're 64-bit, and everything that's already out there and already written is just going to work fine. And hey, let's move on to the next slide, where it was kind of interesting that nothing was announced there. It was almost like an afterthought. It's there, and it works, and developers don't have to do anything. It's just going to work just fine. Moving on.
We had all those big announcements from SoC companies. I mean, going back to last fall, these SoCs are confirmed. It's just a matter of when they're going to show up in devices. So now with Android 64-bit on the software side, all the pieces are in place. It's just a matter of who's going to be first to come out with a phone that takes advantage of them.
Right. But
yeah,
anyways,
and SoCs first and phones second.
Yeah. Well, anyways, are we missing anything particularly from Android L aside from the design UI?
We only have like 10 minutes left, and we have a lot.
Yeah, exactly, and we have a lot more to talk about. I mean, what else are we missing? Because I really want to talk about Android Wear.
I have a concern before we move into that, and this can segue into that. The new unlocking mechanism, when the phone doesn't require you to enter your PIN when you are wearing your watch, and if you take off your watch, then the unlocking mechanism switches back to asking for your PIN. I had this question while I was watching the stream live. Bluetooth has a range of up to 10 to 15 meters. If I just take off my watch and put it to the side, it will still be connected to my phone. My phone will still see me in its range. So I think that it was either an exaggeration while the presenter took off his watch and the phone asked for the PIN, or there's some hocus pocus there which we didn't hear about.
You just didn't see the guy running out of the stage and just running out to all the way to the back of the event. That's what you didn't see.
So either he turned the watch off, or had a Faraday cage, or there might be some proximity sensing going on where maybe the device is looking for the signal strength of that Bluetooth connection and saying, hey, it's getting weaker and weaker and weaker. I know that device is getting further and further away, and maybe there's some kind of a toggle where it's 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet as estimates before it finally says, okay, you're too far away, and it locks. Or it could be just if it's within that, whatever the theoretical maximum limit of that Bluetooth device is.
But
you don't know. They just that too.
The two of us are sitting at a table sharing a meal or a beer or something, and I reach over the table to take your phone, and I don't need to unlock your phone because the phone will still see you.
Yeah, and that's it.
Point is, dude,
or if you're some guy in the bar too, and they just walk by the table, pick it up, go over to the table next door, you don't know it's been stolen, but it's still within range of your watch. Are they going to have access to all of your information because it's unlocked?
Point is, if you have a commanding wife and you don't live in a mansion where you can just stick your wife at some point at the other end of the building or something, the thing is going to know it just won't be able to tell the difference. Obviously, it's something that we have to test. But the thing is, we've seen this on the Moto X already, right, Michael?
We have indeed, yeah. Taylor was making mention of that during the chat of the actual event. Yeah, Trusted Devices it's called, and it's a pretty cool thing on the Moto X when you have a toggle you have with you, and if you get too far away from your phone, it'll lock up. I think it's a cool thing, and I wouldn't, as Joe was saying, I wouldn't think it was a big technical hurdle to specify the range at which you want that to apply. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want it to be 30 feet. I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, that's no security. I mean, if a guy steals my phone and he stays in the same train car as me, I don't want him to be able to unlock it. So I'm fairly certain you can select the range, but I may be wrong.
Now, probably, I don't know. One of the things. It's a cool feature. Probably one of my biggest disappointments with Android L is, or at least the fact that we didn't get anything announced of, all that voice activation features that we currently get on the Moto X. The fact that that Google kept all these patents, and it's not like if we saw that Google is using these patents in favor of Android to get that always-on feature that the Moto X currently has.
Well, that's hardware dependent, though, Jaime. I mean, yes, the Snapdragon 800 has a similar ability built into it, but the Moto X had a custom computing like SoC built to support that feature as well as some others. So it's not, Google can't just come out and say like, hey, it's going to be available on every Android device because it's a hardware specific feature.
Well, we'll see. Sadly, Stephen, for some reason, got dropped off the call. He should be back with us soon. I think we should segue over to Android L, but in wearables, because, so the point being is, one of the coolest things about Android L is the fact that there is no separate SDK for everything else. We got Android Auto, we've got Android TV, we've got Android Wear, and Android on phones and tablets, and it's pretty much the same platform. The only thing that changes is the form factor. And probably that was one of the coolest things about Android L, the fact that you will not have, developers will not have to redo code, I understand, Joe. They would pretty much just build an application for the phone, and there will be an Android Wear portion of it where they can just immediately pass what the smartwatch will be able to pull from the application, right?
Yeah, so essentially any notification that you get or present in your app is automatically exposed right over to your wearable. You can dismiss that notification on the wearable and it dismisses it everywhere else, or dismiss it everywhere else and it dismisses it on the wearable. So that interaction is there by default. When you write custom code to give additional information to that wearable, you're writing it in the same SDK. In fact, you're publishing it in the same app. The app that you download and install from the Play Store to your smartphone or your tablet runs on your smartphone and tablet, and if you have a connected Android Wear device, it automatically gets that partner app, if you will, that little segment of the app on the watch, or notice they didn't just say watch, they said wearables over and over again, so we could see something else coming. But it gets that part of the app automatically. It's installed automatically, it's updated automatically when the app on your phone or tablet are updated as well. If you want to do something extra special and specific, you can write custom code for that wearable, but it's all part of that app that you get through the current distribution mechanism and through the current development environments.
And speaking of apps on the Android Wear devices, it was really, really awesome. The apps that they chose to demo on stage really sold the case for these watches, because the apps on smartwatches are nothing new. I mean, we've seen them on the Gear devices, we've seen them on the Pebble, and they're really good on some of those other hardware. But like this app that was called Eat24, where Singleton ordered a pizza in like 20 seconds on stage right from his watch with no interaction with his phone. You can, like, Lyft has built an app. You can order a car and review the driver. Yeah, like all on the watch. And then the Cooks one, the Chef one, where you can put the recipe on your wrist, and they took that opportunity to say that all the watches are going to be IP67. It all comes together. I mean, the package, I think this is going to be one of the more better integrated and more powerful wearable packages we've ever seen.
I think what's interesting is what we didn't see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't get any mention of completely autonomous Android Wear smartwatches. I mean, there's been this talk about maybe a new Gear from Samsung, but
so everything depends on the phone.
Yeah,
and I'm glad that we didn't, because Samsung's been talking about that, and it would be pretty cool to see like a Gear. What are they calling it? A Gear Solo or whatever?
Gear Solo, yeah.
Yeah, but like that's a very Samsung thing to do, and I don't mean to sound derisive when I say that, but it's like that's a very like, hey, well, let's try everything once kind of thing to do. I don't see Google in its current iteration being like, yeah, you know what, let's just give it a shot and see if it works. It's a much better experience when you have the phone backing up your wearable, I think.
Yeah, today was all about tying devices together and having them work with content from one another rather than splitting things off and going in their own way.
Now tell me something, guys. Is Tony the only person in this room that is not excited about Android Wear?
Probably yes.
About Android Wear.
Okay, Tony, why are you not excited about Android Wear? I want to understand, because everybody, I mean, we were all chatting and we were all going crazy when it was announced and when we saw the demo. I mean, I was probably a little underwhelmed with the LG G Watch's display. It looked really low resolution, but after I kept seeing everything that you can do, when I saw that Moto 360 being demoed, my God, I was drooling. Tony, why don't you like it?
So I said it with a lot of occasions before. I'll continue saying it. I will use a smartwatch when it will improve my life, when it will improve my multitasking way of being. But the way Android Wear is now, it is, for me personally, nothing more than an extension, still an extension of my phone, a secondary screen. And this probably has a lot of things to do with the fact that Google now and all of its tie-ins is not available in my region. I constantly communicate in 3 or 4 languages every day in English with you guys in Romanian and Hungarian, who knows in Italian. I can't dictate in 4 languages for an email. Plus, my phone is nonstop in my pocket or connected to my computer in the car. So right now, for me, Android Wear doesn't bring anything to be excited of.
I don't know. You have a good point. Stephen, go ahead. Stephen, go ahead.
I'm kind of the same way. I realize why Google is doing things the way it is, where this is focused on using the watch more as an extension of the phone than anything else. But I'm a guy who likes the idea of software instead of services. I like the idea of the autonomous smartwatch, even if it's not connected to cellular radio. Just the things are happening on the watch itself, and instead we're seeing it just being used as a screen to the cloud or to the phone or something else. It's just not the product I was looking for, but that doesn't mean that it's not really, really cool for what it does and will be useful to a heck of a lot of people. So it's not for me, but I think it's extremely awesome. So
it could be. I mean, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it could be that for a smartwatch to be fashionable in today's technology age, it could be that the technology is just not there for the smartwatch to remain small and also be a standalone product. I mean, first of all, how many people would be able to pay for a secondary phone line just for their watch when you already have one for your, for your phone?
I mean tablets.
Tablets, but not everybody pays for them. I mean, you have the option that's cool to have, but how many people actually pay for a separate data plan just for their tablets?
Sure.
Yeah, some people could, and paying for an extra one for your watch, I mean, that's every carrier's dream. Now we can charge everybody 3 times for whatever they have connected. But the smartwatch as a standalone, I think, is missing the point. And a lot of people were asking that in the article that I published earlier this morning. People seem to think that a smartwatch is a replacement for a smartphone, and in my opinion, it's really not. What this does is it's a way to augment your experience with either your smartphone or your tablet, and it lets you keep that phone in your pocket more. It lets you keep that screen turned off more of the time, and it lets you have this little itty-bitty screen showing you just the information that you need, or the information that you might not need and can just easily dismiss right there conveniently, quickly. And if you're sitting at a table, you guys can tell me this more than anybody, and somebody pulls out their smartphone and looks at it and interacts with it and puts it back in their pocket, the person sitting across from you that's just rude, right? But if you look at your watch and swipe across and you're done and you're back to the conversation, much easier. Once you compare that,
it is much easier, Joe. But like, for example, one of the things that I've noticed with my use of the Pebble is every time that I get an alert, people are like, "Do you need to leave? Do you need to go?" Because I'm constantly looking at the watch, and I'm like, and I don't say anything. I just look at the alert and I dismiss it. But everybody's like, "Do you need to go? Is it time? Is it late?" I'm like, crap.
Yeah,
so
that's a behavior paradigm that's going to have to change.
Yeah, there is a public ethic issue. Go ahead.
Maybe using my phone wrong in the first place, but every time I sit down, I take it out of my pocket and put it on the table. I don't trust, it getting scratched up or bumped against something down there, so it's already out there for me.
Yeah, and that's exactly my usage scenario. So for me, whether I just swipe on my wrist or swipe on my phone or talk to my wrist or talk to my phone, it's already there. It's the same effort, and I really find no use of wearing something.
Not if you're driving, washing dishes, you're walking down the street, you have the phone, you have one thing in your other hand. There are like 400 million circumstances in which I
agree with Michael. And like, for example, in my case in particular, why do I like a smartwatch? There are certain areas in this city where I can't walk and show my phone because I will immediately be targeted to be mugged. So for me to have a watch that, what do I like the most about the Moto 360? The fact that it looks like any other watch. It looks very elegantly simplistic. So it can pass as a simple watch.
It's going to become a symbol, like, wearing the white earbuds like you are now. The people know you have an expensive, iPod or something. It's just going to, there's a, LGG watch. This guy must have a nice smartphone under his jacket there.
We gotta get Jaime some like sweet Beats, headphones and the Moto 360.
Thank you. I would really
just get him a Bluetooth connected boombox, sit it on his shoulder, go back to the 80s.
Those are cheap, aren't
Michael, which Android Wear product are you getting?
The Moto 360 is absolutely without question, but I was surprised to see that the Gear Live, or not the Gear, yeah, the Gear Live was announced today, and I think the ones that we are getting first are going to be the Gear Live and the G Watch, but the Moto 360 will be the one that I probably spend my own money on, because it's just that circle is just awesome,
So cool.
and I'm glad to hear it's not going to be the last circular display they're going to use, from what we heard on stage today.
Yeah, well, Tony, you won't care. Joe, what are you getting?
Well, I'm getting the LG G Watch just because it's going to be available in the Play Store later today. And actually, I'm refreshing the page right now to see if I can buy it while
Joe,
we're
I've been
hanging
doing
out.
that the whole podcast.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it.
No, I really, really like the Moto 360. I especially like that it's got Qi support built in. And even if I do get the G Watch, which I probably will as soon as it becomes available today, just so we can get it in hand and start getting some videos and getting some articles written about what it is, how it works, some shortcomings and whatnot. Even if I get that, I'm most likely going to get the Moto 360 just because it looks more elegant. It looks more like a timepiece than it does a smartwatch.
Steven, what about you? You don't care, or are you getting one?
If I were to get one, it'd be the Moto 360, because come on, circular displays, they're just cool. It like Joe said, it looks awesome. It's clearly the most high-end, at least appearance-wise. Even if it's a little thick, it's nice looking. I mean, unless you knew to expect that it was a Moto 360, it just looked like any other watch. That's going to be one of the big things.
It looked like any other watch, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
But one question, because I heard that it was a different UI for circular displays. It had a different name.
No, it's the same. It's the same UI. It's just framed differently. It's just circular.
Yep, they gave
The
it a different
SDK
name.
includes, but the SDK includes design hints, and essentially you're designing for circular first, and then it also works on rectangular. So we're going to see more circular stuff going forward as circular LCDs become more of a thing, become more technologically easy to produce. That's my prediction for the future. Some people are still going to want a rectangular watch, and they'll be able to have them. Some people are going to want it round, and they're going to have them. The SDK answers that question. Any app is going to work on either one, no problem. You won't have to worry about it. It'll just work.
I want to hear if we forced Anton to carry one, I want to hear which one is his favorite.
Back in the Pebble days, in the original Pebble days, I said, no, it's not yet for me, I'll wait for other players. Now we have Sony, we have Samsung, and I said, you know what, no, I'll wait for Android Wear because it might be something which is useful for me. Now I say, no, I'll wait for the iWatch because maybe the iWatch will be something useful for me. I'll tell you straight now, nothing from the market. You guys can have mine as well.
Okay, I'll get it. Send it to me. I'll take the 360. But I don't know. I guess probably the biggest disappointment of this event is no hardware. Aside from the fact that you can buy the G Watch and you can buy the Samsung Gear Live today, we did not get a smartphone. We did not get a tablet. I mean, the Nexus 7 has been historically launched on Google I/O for the past 2 years. We were expecting either a Nexus 8 or a Nexus 9, depending on the rumors, and we did not get anything.
And they out-of-stocked the tablets on the Play Store, too, which is kind of indicative that we should be seeing something today.
They're just messing with us at this point.
I think they are.
If there will be a smartphone or a tablet and or both, I think we'll see them around the time when Android L will become final and it will be shipping, and those devices or that device will celebrate the launch, the availability of Android L. I think
if we're waiting until the fall, it might be too late for the Nexus line. I mean, Android 1 could just be the predecessor getting us ready for Android Silver.
Yeah.
And when Android L comes out, it might be ready for that.
We're also likely going to have 64-bit hardware coming out as well, and I think that's really where it's going to be. We'll have an Android Silver in the Play Store. We'll probably still have Play Edition devices, a Google Play Edition, and they'll be 64-bit. They'll run whatever they call the L version of Android, because I still think they're going to do that, but we'll get those in the fall along with the new smartphones and the new tablets. That's my prediction.
We'll see. And I guess final thoughts over the rest of the things that were announced. We saw Android TV, which is, again, Android L expanded to the television, had a really cool UI and everything, but and Taylor made a really good point in the chat that we were talking about. Taylor talking about Android Auto and then Android TV. The fact that it's forcedly specific on brands like Sony TVs. It's not like something where you could just buy a dongle or buy a Chromecast or buy a bigger box and just make it work on your current TV. No, you sadly have to buy a new TV. In the case of Android,
they'll be releasing boxes.
Yeah, you'll see boxes and you'll see keys, just like the Chromecast. Don't worry, they didn't announce them, but you will. The main take-home out of both Android TV and Android Auto is it's not really software that's running there. It's more like an ability to cast stuff to it and display in that environment from your phone or from your tablet. So you no longer have to worry about updating your car or updating your TV or updating whatever else. You're updating your tablet, and whatever you're running there, whether it's Android L or whatever letter comes after L, or whether it's a new device that has a faster processor, you're automatically just going to get that in your car, on your TV. It's going to be there all over the place, which is a different approach than what we've had with smart TVs today, where you're hardly ever going to see an update to whatever's running on your LG TV or on your Sony TV. It's old right out of the box, and it's never getting an update, and that has some serious usability as well as security concerns.
Probably the only cool thing that I found about Android TV was the fact that I could control it with my whatever smartwatch I get.
Oh, yeah, and that was beautiful.
That was cool. That was really cool. Probably the only cool thing that we saw in a future update that'll come to the Chromecast, by the way, you will be able to create ambiances in order to have your TV become your picture board or whatever, but probably even cooler is that now you won't have to share your Wi-Fi password. People will be able to control your Chromecast remotely. So it's interesting how they keep enhancing this $35 accessory into doing more things. So again, a lot of things were announced today. A lot of things were good. I don't think we could say that there was anything negative announced. Everything was very positive.
No.
Obviously,
There was stuff that I thought we were going to get that we didn't. Oh Lord, I'm shutting down.
Then I'll jump in and do negatives. We did have protesters there. And,
oh my God! What was that?
And killer robots. That's awesome. So developers, if you are watching this, please make sure you include Asimov's 3 laws of robotics when you're making your killer robots. So please, can I ask that?
My God, what was the guy complaining about? That was just like, you couldn't even let the guy talk. I was expecting eggs and tomatoes being thrown at the guy and stuff. It was really bad.
Yeah, you had net neutrality protesters there, which Google is all behind net neutrality, so that didn't make any sense to me. You had fair housing. I don't know what that has to do with Google. Maybe we can talk about that offline after. And then killer robots. Wow.
There's a very large local dispute in San Francisco with regard to Google and how it occupies the space and how it is or is not contributing to the what do you call it, the whitewashing of the space. I forgot the fancy word for it because I'm tired, but yeah, there was a lot of protest stuff going on. It was pretty nuts.
Okay, Steven, before you get dropped off again, dude, final thoughts. What was the negative? Throw everything at the table right now.
Not so much negative, just I was expecting to get something about glass. And, I mean, we had the expanded availability coming to the UK. They announced the new hardware upgrade yesterday. I suspected there to be, finally, this big, we're making glass available for $700. It's going to be in Best Buys. You can go try it out.
Half price.
I mean, this has to happen eventually, and it's just a matter now of how long Google's going to keep dragging us along. And that talk about, wearables in general versus smartwatches, it kept implying, oh, there's going to be, some other form factor here, but didn't come up. Maybe for another day.
I'm all for the Pocket Watch.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But anyways, well, isn't the Pocket Watch your current smartphone, dude?
Just put it on a gold chain and absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a round smartphone? Wow.
That would be
wall-mounted Android Wear clocks.
But anyways, let's go through some final thoughts, guys, because we have a lot of work, and we just ran out of time. Mr. Tony, What are your thoughts?
I think everything we've seen is positive. I think everything we've seen is pushing the envelope. Google managed to up the ante, and I think right now it's Apple's move, because after everything we've seen today, Apple has to really come up with something better. I'm not saying they have to have an iPhone 6, which is better than any other Android phone out there. I'm talking services. I'm talking orientation towards user experience, usability, and future.
Well, that's your opinion, obviously. I don't know. I just, for example, they threw in Google Fit just out of the blue, because there was health kit being announced at WWDC and things. I don't know. It seemed like if a lot of the things that they announced just tried to match what was announced at WWDC in a way. But yeah, definitely, Apple will have to push the ante with hardware. Indeed. How about you, Joe?
Well, I did notice that there was one little quip pointed right at Apple, basically saying, here's the timeline of Android, and look, we've had lock screens, we've had notification shades, we've had widgets for the last 4 or 5 years. Oh, and by the way, yeah, 64 bits here, and we're doing Android Fit and Android Wear, and so it was kind of downplaying on Apple, saying Apple just came up to speed with where we were 4 years ago, and yeah, we'll have 64-bit and some of this other stuff, and it'll just be there, and it'll just work. And that was great, but it was a lot of reading between the lines. They told us a lot of cool stuff, but they left a lot of stuff to the, oh yeah, we've been doing that. You didn't know that. Why didn't you know that? Well, you didn't tell us. But overall, I'm impressed. I like it. One little bit of information that I have breaking from MKBHD per our fun user Zach Schmessing. Apparently, the LG G Watch will be available on the Google Play Store at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So there we go.
No sleep for you, my friend.
That's one of those things that's going to break the internet.
Just a little bit.
Mr. Michael Fisher, what are your final thoughts?
Well,
Michael.
So that doesn't matter if
And I think the internet.
I think the internet's dying over there.
He did. He said it was going to break the internet, and then
still
it did.
break 20 minutes.
You jinxed the internet, man.
And you can see that, and now I'm talking because now I'm hearing what you guys said 30 seconds ago, and now it's what a mess. I hate Hangouts, not only when I have a poor connection. The point is, if I in fact still to any, we saw some interesting things today. I think I was impressed with your face or not, if you like them or not, but the PS4 taste is definitely, if nothing else, consistent. We've seen Ripple touch interfaces, from him before. We've seen certainly card-based paradigms before, and I'm excited to try out in particular the new multitasking approach because I think that's going to be a very fun thing. I didn't happen to catch whether the cards are live when you see them, but I hope they are, and I'm pretty jazzed to try it out. But on the phones, I think the user-facing stuff was pretty tame. I don't think we're gonna be flipping out over shadows on cards. I'm certainly most excited to see what happens with Wear, and I think it's going to be a big old challenge to competitors. Sans whatever, but Pebble. I'm really interested to see how Pebble reacts to that from a competitive standpoint.
It would be cool if Pebble came out with a Android Wear, smartwatch. I think that's like the smartest way to go.
And we do have an editorial on what they could do to take it to a 2.5 version of Pebble, but we don't know if they'll follow through with that or not.
We'll see. What about you, Mr. Stephen Chang?
Unmute there. I think a lot of what we saw, wasn't too surprising. This isn't groundbreaking stuff. We didn't get the hardware a lot of people were looking forward to. Personally, I think material design was the most important thing to come out of this. And I'm getting shut off again. It's
Well, to pick up where Stephen left off, material design is a really big thing going forward, and probably the bigger thing about it is it's not just Android. Google said that they also updated their web development SDK. They're also pushing some of that over to their laptop, the Chromebook, and now we're seeing that on some of the other devices as well. So really, material design is what the whole software side of the I/O was all about, and we'll see more of that as breakouts are happening. I'm sure developers are sitting in those right now, which is where I'd love to be. But material design, that's going to be the direction of Android for at least the next year or two, in addition to the web stuff, all of Google's web services, and all of the peripheral devices, whether it's in your car, on your TV, or on your wrist.
Jaime, I think it's time for us to conclude
Yeah.
this 30-minute roundtable after an hour.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I muted. Definitely. My final thoughts are just, to wrap up, I am very excited, especially for Android Wear. I think that that's really where smartwatches had to go at some point. Google now has a point, an additional point of being now. I did like the fact that Google decided to integrate everything, the Chromecast, Chromebooks, Android applications on Chromebooks. The fact that now there is an advantage to owning an Android phone and a Chromebook, for example. I liked all those things, but specifically wearables. And there's a lot more coverage coming up. Obviously, we will be talking about it on tomorrow's podcast as well. We will be talking about it on editorials coming up. We have another video coming up, the Pocketnow Daily. So please, everybody, stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching this video, and hopefully we will see you soon, as we are completely off time already. If we're not missing anything else, we are signing off. Thank you very much for watching.